Hello everyone and welcome back to another What I Ate in a Week. My name's Phoebe if you're new. I write recipes, am a freelance writer, currently studying library studies, who's also neurodivergent, and you're very welcome here. In this overdue What I Ate in a Week, I really lent into safe foods, big time, which for me are rice, tofu, noodles, repeat. I've had a really big year, and in the past weeks which I've been trying to wind down, I'm realizing I do that in different ways over a period of time. And as someone who loves food and cooking, I was clocking that I needed a bit more of a break or like a holiday vibe in this area. So I decided to lean into safe foods longer than I usually would, which would usually be like leaning in for certain meals or maybe a whole day at once, but never like pushing past the learnt rules in my head around what is good eating, going, no, I'm going safe foods for the whole freaking week. It was a really revealing exercise. Like, I think we all, just because of the world we live in, we'll always have things we can work on with our relationship to food. And if you're someone who loves food and cooking, then I think our enthusiasm for that can kind of mask the challenges we have with it, the things we have to work on. Like for me, and some of these are helpful, but can quickly, for me, just create too much like food noise and like mental load with food. Things like every meal has to have greens, has to be an array of different colours on the plate. This one's such a me thing, which is like a meal is only valid if it has a certain amount of effort put into it. And then the other big one is like I eat 3 meals at quite specific set times, especially dinner. I'm often thinking about how reasonable it is to get back to the level of food freedom I had as a kid, and maybe I'm romanticizing it was more at certain moments, but for me it was the feeling of like school holidays or being on holiday and just like pursuing deliciousness and not overthinking what I'm eating in the slightest. Yes, for the most part someone else was taking responsibility for like my nutritional needs, but like fast forward to when you're an adult and that role's now yours, and I think is really easily compounded when you have allergies, intolerances, food preferences, sensory aversions. It can get to the point where each meal requires like 1,000 calibrations of seeing if that meal fits your mood, but also like these learnt rules around food and then the ideal we think we should be working towards. Anyway, it's a lot. I ironically kind of had to push past the discomfort of the million inner voices or critics telling me what I should and shouldn't be eating and just try and have a good time with it. Anyway, let's get into it. So on Sunday, I had one of my usual breakfasts of a salty egg on gluten-free toast with some protein powder in dairy-free milk. I was trying this Nutrigrain flavoured one by Macro Mike, which they just brought out, and then I made some egg salad with some eggs I'd boiled the night before, Kewpie mayonnaise and Dijon mustard. Just a heads up, I'm not showing every breakfast and snack that I had in this week because I never have the energy to film all of that, and I like to keep the focus on the meals. The protein powder was okay, but didn't really taste overly of Nutrigrain in my opinion. More of like generic caramel vanilla. Then I was in the mood for a big, totally draining cooking session, which I get when I haven't been cooking new things consistently for a while. I made the lemongrass tofu from my new cookbook, trialing cooking it in the oven instead of on a fry pan, which was not better in hindsight, so don't do that. I prepped some lettuce and carrot though to make these into rice paper rolls later on in the day. I then made some protein cookies by Macro Mike. They were on sale. It was the only Black Friday purchase I made, okay? Which were very Moorish, although maybe a touch too sweet for my taste. I had some vegan Kraft mac and cheese seasoning left over to use up, so thinking creatively, I decided to bread some tofu in it, making a crumb seasoned with the vegan cheesy powder, oregano, paprika, salt and pepper. I used a cornstarch oil slick to adhere that onto the tofu, which works super duper well. These turned out to be delicious, but the mac and cheese seasoning added less than I thought it would, so I would probably just put it into cheesy cauliflower or on top of some popcorn next time. I then had a wee lunch break of my favourite cheesy kimchi, carrot and tofu rice hash. The recipe's on my website. I eat it about once a week. Later in the day, I rolled up the rice paper rolls with the lemongrass tofu and had a few of those with some prepared peanut hoisin dipping sauce and some Vietnamese dipping sauce, which I had prepped and had in the fridge. Then I think I went and saw a movie that evening, so I took a couple of those cookies with me. Monday for lunch, I made a wrap using some of the prepared crumb tofu from the day before and leftover lettuce and carrot. I added cucumber, salsa, mayo and Cholula hot sauce to give it a burrito-y vibe. That was so delicious. Then for dinner I made the Vietnamese rice noodle salad with spring rolls from my new cookbook. using prepared rice paper spring rolls I had in the freezer. One slightly life-changing, wonderful accommodation that I've started doing, which relates to this, is having a freezer inventory on my fridge. Our fridge isn't magnetic, so I found this kind of ugly removable sticker thing. It is what it is. But you might have seen people doing this. Essentially, you write down the ingredients or like prepped stuff that's in your freezer. And it's a really helpful way to keep what's out of sight in mind. And the freezer often holds things that, with a bit of forethought, are time-saving or really convenient to center a meal around. And yeah, I found it very, very helpful with meal planning and preventing food waste. I adapted my recipe to utilize what veggies and rice noodle odds and ends we had on hand, and I love this dish so much. The spring rolls are the most delicious, hearty, satiating, savory thing. I could eat them like every day. On Tuesday for lunch, I got a zambrero because I had a free one on my loyalty card. So a vegan burrito bowl with refried pinto beans, rice, guacamole. You get the idea. Then for dinner, I made my most Lent-on safe food, a tofu sushi bowl. The recipe's on my website, but you essentially season the tofu with garlic, olive oil, tamari, nutritional yeast, and some vegetarian chicken stock powder, and fry that off in a little sunflower oil until crispy. I prepared extra rice to make some onigiri because I've been kind of on a onigiri kick. That's hard to say. But once the tofu has like 80% of the colour you want, I add the broccoli to the pan, let that char a little for a few minutes, add a splash of water, and then steam until tender. I add sesame seeds and serve it over rice with cucumber, avocado, pickled ginger, spring onion, chili crisp, and Japanese mayo. It's kind of like my favourite sushi in a bowl. Then I shape the onigiri, filling it with a kimchi tuna filling, and then I wrap them in plastic to reheat the next day. On Wednesday, we didn't have power for a lot of the day, so while electrical work was being done, I was also losing the plot waiting for the second print run of my cookbooks to arrive. Yeah, so it was just a bit of a weird day, and essentially I just kind of ate my onigiri throughout the day, reheating them in a steamer basket because we could make our gas stove still work. It's an imperfect reheating method, but it works when you don't have a microwave. I also photographed my recipe for this month on this day, which was a passion fruit vanilla slice I created for my micro bakery and was a big hit back in the day. Great Christmas recipe if you need one. So of course I enjoyed some of that. Then I was not in the mood for cooking, so we got tofu pad thai. And another accommodation I've just been trying to lean into more is to get takeaway when it makes sense for my energy levels, not when it makes sense because of the rules I grew up with around when it's acceptable to get takeaway, which is Friday or Saturday once in a while. Because the value for money is so much more when I lean into that when I really don't have the spoons to cook. On Thursday for lunch, I had another onigiri with some steamed veggies for a light lunch before I met my friend at a new completely gluten-free cafe. Both of us are gluten-free and neurodivergent, and I feel like this is another thing I've been doing which just is like a recipe for a good time, which is finding novelty in the familiar. So the framework is we love good food, really appreciate when it's gluten-free, but it was somewhere I hadn't been before. So it really kind of satisfies my autism's desire for safety or like familiarity, a format where I know what to expect, and my ADHD's longing for like novelty and spontaneity. I had the lightest lemon vanilla cake I've ever had in my life there, and a super large, so Moorish iced chai. And then for dinner, my mum and I split one of their vegan spinach cheese triangles. I mean, just look at that lamination! Yeah, with some greens and leftover potato salad my mum had bought. That pastry was phenomenal, and I'm just so jealous I don't know how to make that. Anyway, then I had a chocolate chia pudding with peanut butter and raspberries, which is one of my go-to favourite, feels good on the tummy desserts. Moving on to Friday's lunch, I had the pad thai leftovers. Then because the second print run of cookbooks had arrived the previous day, I set out for an afternoon of deliveries to stockists around Melbourne. And it was like about 4 hours of driving, but I'm really proud of myself because I practiced what I need to do, which is pacing really long car journeys in ways I can, which this time was sprinkling in some pit stops to have some favourite foods. And it always blows my mind how much of a difference it makes for helping your stamina. I mean, like, scheduling delicious food throughout the day is how I survived high school, so it's not that surprising. But yeah, it was worth every penny and meant I didn't crash as hard when I got home. Still crashed, but I didn't shut down. I went to a specialty tofu place and had some of their tofu nuggets with the most Moorish spice blend. I don't know what's going on there. And this mustard tarragon sauce, 11 out of 10. They were so light and sweet, salty, savoury. Oh my gosh. Still thinking about them. Then later I got some self-serve acai with a healthy amount of raspberries, chia pudding and peanut butter. They're my non-negotiables on my order. It took an embarrassing amount of effort to be like, you can eat what you want at unconventional times of day, Phoebe, and realize that I wasn't very hungry for dinner. I was going to say I just had, but it wasn't just. I had this potato croquette that I also got from the tofu place. So good. And I think I then just had like a cup of tea later on. On Saturday, I was a bit embarrassed that I still didn't really feel like cooking, but I just pushed through that, rolled with it at lunchtime, and got some sushi and a miso soup, which I put some of the char siu marinated tofu that I got at the tofu place the previous day in it to make it more filling. Then I reached the point that evening where I could feel that I didn't want to cook still, but I was actually at the point where I needed to gently coax myself back into doing it, which is a fine line, and I think it's only really a feeling I've been able to pinpoint in the last few years, especially since going through a period of depression and needing to push myself to do the things that make me feel good even when you don't feel like doing them, because as a bummer as it is, it does help. Anyway, so I've been wanting to make a really gentle stir fry that is like a takeout dish I had a long time ago. The closest thing I thought it might be is the Indonesian, is it capcut? I don't know how to pronounce it, but I picked a recipe online for that. I know it can look, and there's a million variations of it, but I made a tofu veg version, crinkle cutting my carrots for the full takeaway effect. I put ginger in it, don't know if that was traditional, tofu veggies, and then it was like a cornstarch thickened oyster sauce, fish sauce, seasoned sauce. It wasn't exactly how I remember, so maybe that wasn't it. I think it was actually from a Singaporean restaurant when I looked it up, but it was exactly the veg heavy, really comforting genre warm hug like dinner I was really craving. And that is everything I ate this week. My cookbook is still available. Now the second print run is here. If you're in need of a Christmas present, there are probably still a few days for you to do that to get it in time for Christmas when you're watching this. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.